Hi friends, Andrea here with the whole kit and caboodle. Welcome to our two-part session, Small Paper, Big Impact. In these two sessions, we're going to learn how to take small paper pads, such as the 6x6 and the 6x8, and to turn them into beautiful 12x12 scrapbook pages. These have been around for years now, and they started as a trend among card makers so that there would be little waste. But it's also perfect for your 12x12 pages, especially if you're working on a themed album. This entire paper pad could help you produce dozens and dozens of pages. So with our first session, we are going to start with the Love Never Ends page kit. With this page, you won't need any chalking inks, but you will need your basic supplies. So make sure you grab your ruler, your adhesive, your 12x12 paper trimmer, and some scissors. And let's get started. For this particular spread, we're actually going to do something a little different. So typically when we do two pages that are side by side in your album, we logically start with the left side of the spread, and then we end our way finishing up with the right page. For this one, we're actually going to flip that around, and we're going to begin with the right page of this spread. So if you're following along with the instructions, you will actually need to skip down, and then we're going to start with the right page. So make sure if you're following along that you start down here with the right page instructions. The reason why we're going to do that is because this is a class that we also taught in person at several conventions. And when we taught that class, this is the side of the spread that we taught in that in-person venue. So we've already pulled out the papers that you need from our 6x6 paper pad. So it'll make it a little easier this go around. So obviously our background for this particular page is the solid white. So go ahead and pull out one of those solid color whites. When I started in this industry in 2000, so a couple decades ago, there was a trend with the company who used white cardstock for all of their backgrounds. And the creative graphic artist side of me always wanted to defy the trends. So I always avoided using the solid color white because I wanted mine to stand out and to be a little different. I have since learned how to embrace the white background, specifically with this particular page, because as you flip through the album, you'll notice that a lot of those pages have a pop of white. So by adding this solid white, it really helps bring these colors to life and really lift them off the page. Also, since we have so much going on here with a lot of words and a lot of different patterns, it's a great way to give your eye a little space to rest. So I've learned to embrace the 12x12 white. And as you know, I'm a big fan of My Colors cardstock. So it's the only cardstock that we use at the whole kit and caboodle for all of our kits. You'll notice something new with My Colors cardstock, and a lot of them will now have that barcode. So know when you're starting with a solid piece of cardstock that there is a chance that there is that barcode now. And we'll want to snip that off so that you start with a legit 12x12 page. So don't forget to make sure you always check for that when you're using the 12x12 solid color cardstock as your background. So I'm going to go ahead and snip that off. They will eventually all be made that way. So as all of the new papers are made, now that Photoplay owns that company, you'll notice that they'll all come back with that barcode strip. So just something to be aware of. Make sure you always cut that off, because if not, it's going to be a 12 by 12 1/4, and it wouldn't fit in your page protector. So you want to make sure that we always cut that back down to a 12 by 12. All right, so as I had mentioned, we have already cut or tore out of that booklet the 3 sheets that you need for this particular page. Don't forget that in these paper pads all of them are double-sided. So you can use obviously one side or the other, or with this first step, we're actually going to use both sides of this 6x6 piece. So I'm going to set these aside, and then what we're going to do here is, you'll notice we're going to give the illusion that we have an entire 12-inch strip going down the side here. And then we are going to use this color to kind of accent over here. I really love how this little pop of yellow draws your eye into that photo because it really stands out, but it really then connects that strip of paper here. So you really see these pops of yellow. They really kind of bring your eye into that page. So all of these dimensions are going to be written in your instructions. I'll go ahead and say them aloud too, but know if you miss it, you can always go back and look at the instructions from the kit. Or once this airs in the original live broadcast, you could always pause and then go back and rewind and hear those dimensions over and over again. But we need to cut this into 3 pieces because it's going to take 2 strips to make this border here, and then we need an extra piece for that border there. So from this single 6x6, I want you to go ahead and cut a 1x6. So obviously it's already 6 inches. So we just need to line up your trimmer and cut 2 1-inch strips. So 1x6 there and a 1x6 there. These are the 2 pieces that we're going to use to make this side here. So once you get those cut, the next one is 1 1/4. So 1 1/4 by 6. And I'm going to show you how I'm doing it here, which I think is a little easier. So if I move my trimmer over. So I originally took my 6x6 piece and cut off that barcode strip. So then I could slip it and cut it in the reverse. So I'm not going to, just to show you, I'm not going to cut it though. So if you start with the 6-inch piece and then cut that off, then you can slide it over 1 inch, slide it another inch, and then slide it for 1 1/4 inches. To me, that's way easier than trying to get that 1-inch little strip lined up. Now, if you're using a bit of a smaller trimmer, it might be a little easier to do that. I really prefer the 12x12s. You know, I don't crop on the road very often. If I'm cropping on the road, it's because I'm working. So I prefer the big 12x12 trimmers. So sometimes the smaller trimmers are better and easier on these little pieces. But I find if you're using the 12x12 trimmer, it's kind of easier to work it that way. So we have our 2 1x6s, and then we have our 1 1/4. And then this is going to be extra, so we don't need that for anything for this page. So we have our 2 strips here that we're going to use to create this border here. And that's the same paper, just in reverse, that we're eventually going to add over here to our page. All right, so for now, I'm just going to set that yellow one aside, and we're going to take these 2 pieces and we're going to align them right here on the page. The reason why I chose this exact piece of paper is because when you look, there is kind of no rhyme or reason. Their pattern of flowers is very eclectic. It doesn't follow a certain pattern at all. So when they butt up to each other to form that 12-inch piece, it really doesn't matter that one flower kind of goes into the next flower. Because if you look at our final sample, if I bring that really close, right there is our border where the 2 pieces overlap. So if we point it out, you can see where those 2 pieces meet. But when you're just looking at it like this, because of the, you know, really random pattern of the flowers, it really looks like one continuous piece. So if you're going to do your small paper pads with this particular usage, you want to make sure it's a pattern that can easily line up and doesn't have that exact need to be exact. So if you were, for example, if you were going to use this pattern and line it so that two were above each other, you know, you would have to exactly follow the white, exactly follow the yellow, or you would be able to tell where those two were separated. So this one, again, is a little more loosely designed, so it made it really easy to line them together, and from a distance, you can't tell at all that it's two separate pieces. All right, so we're gonna line that along the edge there. And there we go. So again, you know that seam is there. So when you're really looking, you can see that it's there. But as people are flipping through your album and they're looking at the beautiful page, they're looking at the photos, chances aren't very great that they're going to notice that little teeny seam of paper, because specifically of the patterns that we chose. All right. Sometimes when you're cutting strips like this, if they are just like a 1/16 of an inch off, you can really tell when they're vertical this way. So the reason I cut this little strip here is that if your borders aren't exactly precise, we're going to cover up that little boo-boo as you would have it. So in your pack of paper, you have a piece of blue cardstock. So we're going to cut just a really, really thin strip of that blue. It's just about 1/4 of an inch, so it's super thin. It doesn't have to be exact. You can eyeball it, but we want just enough just to kind of hide that edge there along the left side. So I'm going to take my trimmer and cut that thin strip. So again, it doesn't really have to be precise. This is one that you can just kind of eyeball, and as long as it's a pretty thin strip, it'll all be good. Then I'm going to take my adhesive. Because it's such a thin strip, I'm going to use a liquid adhesive. My tape runner is wider than this piece here. So for me, it's going to be easier to use the liquid. And then we're going to take that and we're going to adhere just along that left edge of our pattern papers. Now we want to overlap that left edge just a little bit. I'm going to bring it over just a hair more. So we want to overlap it, but just barely. All right, there we go. So if you look at our page here, just in one step, how just that little teeny border really starts making a difference. When you do an edge like this, it sets a boundary for your eye. So since this is the right side of the spread, so it would be the very edge of the spread, it kind of tells your eye, hey, we're going to stop here because everything you need to see is on the inside. So when you're doing something like this, you kind of want to make sure that it's on the outside edge. Of course, every rule is made to be broken, so there's always exception to that rule. But if you're, as a general rule of thumb, if you're going to put a straight border like this, you want it along the outside edge because it really tells your eye, hey, stop. So this says stop, come back, and enjoy the view. All right, so now we're going to work with this pink piece of paper here. So we're going back to those two 6x6s that we have already pre-cut for you. And one of those is that pink paper. And from this pink paper, that's already, of course, it's already 6 inches, we need a strip that's 1.5 inches. So again, let me bring my cutter over here so that you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to cut this at 6 inches. So that way I can cut off that binder of how it was attached to the booklet. And then I'm going to go in 1.5 inches. So 1 inch would be 5.5. So there's our 1.5 inch strip. Make sense? All right, move this back over here. All right, so when we adhere it to the page, we're obviously going to go here in our upper left corner. So we give you the dimensions if you want it to be exact. These are just kind of meant to give you as a guideline. So obviously it doesn't have to be exact to the dimensions that we are going to give you. But if you want it to look at least a little similar, we do give you the exact dimensions from the top and then from the edge. So for this particular piece, it's about 3/4 from the left. So about 3/4 from the left and about 1.25 inches from the top. So 1.25 inches from the top. So I'm going to use my adhesive runner here. So you can pull out your ruler, or we can just eyeball it here. So it's about 3/4 of an inch and about 1.25 inches. All right, my husband is a woodworker, and he does amazing work. He has created our pergola. He is in the process of making furniture for the backyard. He's an amazing woodworker, just uber creative in his own right. And he can look at a piece of wood and tell you exactly how long it is, or he can stand in a room and tell you, you know, what 3 feet looks like. And I do not have that at all. I just don't have that ability unless it's less than 12 inches. And when it's less than 12 inches, I can usually nail it. So if we were to measure, if this was 3/4 and this was 1.25 inches, I bet you I'd be almost spot on. So if it's under 12 inches, I'm queen. All right. So now that we have our pink piece here, we are going to do our teal piece of paper here. So we have our teal that has our white flowers on it. Now, if you look at the final sample here, it almost looks like it's elongated, right? This surely doesn't look like a 6x6 piece of paper. But the way that we're using it really is going to give the illusion that it's much bigger than a 6x6, because we're going to use this just as a 6x6. So go ahead and cut off that white strip, that binder piece from where it was stuck into our album. And then I'm going to do this decorative cut here. So if you look at the bottom, we have that triangular shape cut. We don't want to go in very deep. So be very conscientious when you go in. It's going to be, you know, a really tight angle. We really don't want to go up at an angle like that because it's going to cut into it too much. So we want to make sure we're doing just a really shallow angle there. If you're worried about it being exact, first of all, it doesn't have to be exact. It's really okay. I'm giving you permission that one side can be a little different than the other, and it's really okay. But if you're worried, you can take your 2 sides here, lightly put them together. We don't want to crimp them, but you can cut them simultaneous if you want them to be exact. It doesn't matter to me. So I'm just going to go ahead and make my snip. Of course, we don't want to go in very far. I'm going to guess that that is about halfway. And then I'm going to come over here And I'm going to follow about the same angle. And then I'm just going to keep snipping until they meet. Now, are they exact? No. If you look here, we got, you know, one side is over the halfway mark. It's probably the same here. The focus is your photos. So while this page is beautiful and it's a great accent to your photos are the focus. So really and truly, all of the minor details like this, if they're not perfect, it's okay. Now, I say that, I am a perfectionist, so I want the overall look to look like that perfectionist. But little things like this, people aren't gonna notice. All right, so we're gonna go ahead after we have that. Doesn't that always happen? Right when you least want it to. All right, so give me a second. I'm going to go grab more adhesive. And then I will put the adhesive in on camera. What's one of the #1 questions we get asked? Can you please put the adhesive back in for me? So let me go grab some adhesive and we'll continue on here. I am a particular fan of the ATG gun, and I know it's a little cumbersome for a lot of people, but as much as I scrapbook, I like the fact that I don't have to do this very often. These particular rolls last a long time, and when you are doing hundreds of pages in a year, the least amount of time I have to spend doing exactly this, the better. So there's my little shout out to the ATG gun. All right, so I'm gonna peel off that start. This goes on that first wheel, and you'll hear it lock. And then we're gonna go over and under, and of course to release, we have to pull the trigger and bring it over. Then we have all of these little slots here. We're gonna go in and out. Now mine is really sticky. That wheel is really sticky because I've used it, you know, so much. So then my wrap easily sticks to it because there's already kind of adhesive built up there. All right, we need to put our wheel back on and we're ready to go. All right, we have the one piece that kind of went haywire. Get that cut off. All right, so we're gonna add our adhesive to our 6x6 piece that we've done that little banner cut. Now, when we go to adhere this piece, we wanna make sure that the left edge of the teal aligns with the left edge of the pink. We do want to do just a little bit of a gap in between, because if you see on the final, we do have a piece that's going to go in between those. So if it's easier for you, if you're afraid to eyeball it, if you go back to your kit, you do have that teal cardstock already cut that's going to go across, so you can kind of use that as your guide. If you want to make sure that you get that spacing right, this is a little important to make sure you get that spacing right. I'm just going to eyeball it there and put it about there. So as you can see, we're starting to, by making this piece, we're starting to elongate that pattern. And when all is said and done, this is still that same 6x6 piece that's going to look a lot longer than just a 6x6 piece. And you'll see that as we finish this next step here. So we have the yellow chevron, that was the back side of this. And then we have our teal cardstock that is already cut to shape for you. So we're going to take our runner. We are going to adhere our yellow strip in the center of our teal cardstock. And then we're going to adhere this piece where those two meet. So it is just a tad longer. And there we go. So see what I mean by how this piece here, because we have stacked it with 2 other pattern papers, because we have cut this little divot here, that makes this piece, this side, look longer. So by cutting this shape, it really pulls the sides down to make them look longer. So when you were to look at this strip here, that it's all complete, who would have guessed that that was all done by 6 by 6 pages? It really gives, this specifically gives the illusion that it's, 8-9 inches long. And we've done that just by stacking the pattern papers and then elongating that pattern with this banner cut. So this is all of the pattern paper for this particular page. So now everything is all the fun stuff now, right? All the embellishments. But again, so we have created this very simplistic, yet very elegant and well stated kind of background sheet using only 6 by 6 patterns. And we've done that with only 3 sheets of the 6 by 6. And we still had leftovers. So, we still have this piece left over. We still have this piece left over. So we didn't even use a full sheet, of the 6 by 6. So it's amazing how far you can make it go when you're using these smaller paper pads. All right, the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and cut our photo mats. So we always tell you the exact dimensions of the photo mats that we've used in the sample. Obviously, you're gonna go with whatever works for your photos. For simplicity's sake, I'm gonna go ahead and cut them identical to what it is in the sample. So we have 3 3/4 by 5 1/4. And then we have that smaller 3 by 3. So that mat's going to be 3 1/4 by 3 1/4. All right, on the smaller squares, it does look like it's really tiny and, there's not much room for a photo there, but I think you'll be surprised how much you can see on a 3 by 3. I also get asked, why do I oftentimes use the 3.5 by 5 photo size? The reason is it's the same dimensions as a 4 by 6, only shrunk down just a little bit so that you can use that same 4 by 6 photo, just shrunk down. It's the same kind of dimensions of that. And the smaller photos, you can get more on a page. So for this here, obviously a 4 by 6 photo is still going to fit beautifully. If you'd rather keep that photo exactly intact, go ahead and cut that at 4 1/4 by 6 1/4. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and adhere the bigger one. And then I'm gonna pause on the smaller one until I start kind of laying my page together. So for the larger photo, we're gonna go ahead and put that right in the center there. So you'll also notice, because of the way that the paper is cut, I'm always thinking about how can I draw my eye into the photo? That is the #1 thing you need to focus on when you're making a scrapbook page, because the highlight of every single page, no matter how beautiful they are, needs to be the photo. So I'm always thinking about how we're gonna lead the eye directly to the photo. So you'll see here, so our banner cut here served 2 purposes. It really elongated our paper, but it also serves as like an arrow that points you right to that photo. So always make sure that when you look, that the photo really remains that focus of your page. All right, so now we have the fun part of all of the die cuts. So in your packets, We have all of the die cuts and the embellishments for this page all together in one baggie, trying to make it as simple for you as possible. And because this class can be a little more time consuming, we also didn't do any inking, but that is totally up to you. I'm a huge fan of using the chalk inks, and it's pretty rare for me not to use chalk inks at all. However, I loved, again, the really classic, elegant look of the white paper. It really is like a stark design choice. So I wanted to keep these as simple and clean as possible. But it is totally your page. So if you want to use pop dots, if you want to use chalking ink, all of that is totally up to you. All right, so let's start by putting together some of our florals, and then we'll end with our title there. So this flower here, we have 3 layers. I always grab them with my reverse tweezers. It's just easier for me to keep track of. Just gonna dot it with just a little bit of adhesive there. Our yellow goes to our blue. And it doesn't really matter what order that you're putting all of these together, because we're gonna put all of the embellishments together first, and then we'll finish up our page. All right. And then that flower, you'll notice, has that pink center. I have never really been a pink girl. If you follow me very long, you will know that. My love language speaks in blues and greens. So maybe that's why I was blessed with boys. But blues and greens are so much easier for me. So pinks have been a bit of a challenge, but I have learned to embrace it over the years because I make myself use it. And by making yourself do something over and over again, you're gonna learn to love it. So I have learned how to embrace the pink. And I have also learned that for me personally, I have 3 boys. So it is perfectly okay if I have boys on this page with pink embellishments. But again, that's totally personal preference. If you stray away with the pinks, that's okay too. But for me, my family definitely are my 3 children. 2 of them are married, my youngest in a serious relationship. So to me, it's okay to intermix the boys with the pink highlights there. All right, so we're gonna go next with one of the flowers, and they both layer the same, so they're the exact same flower, they're just flipped. So the yellow is our base. We use the teal as the next layer. You'll also notice that when I started to adhere all of these pieces together, I took my page away. So I don't want to get any of that extra adhesive oozing out onto my actual page itself. So I'm working directly on the desk, just in case any of that adhesive decides to go overboard, we don't get that stuck to our page. All right, so then we're gonna do that top layer there. All right, easy peasy. So then we just have one more flower to put together. Then we can work on our title. So again, the flower is identical as the one we just did. It's just flipped and curved the opposite way. So we're gonna glue the teal to the yellow. And if you are a Xyron user, these are obviously small enough that you can just run those through your Xyron machine. If you're ever worried about keeping up or keeping on task during a class, this is one thing that's easy that you can do in advance. So pull out all of the die cuts of the kit and kind of assemble those together, or some of them. That could help make sure that you kind of stay catch up as we're moving along here. All right, so there we have our flowers. These are all single layers, so I'm going to just put those up to the top. We try to be good to you, and a lot of these letters are all connected. There are a couple that are in different pieces. We tried to make that as easy as possible. I'm going to set those to the side. So for this first one, I'm just going to adhere the word family to our white base. Now, you might say, why did you use a white base? Because we have a white background. So why would you do the white on white? So if you look closely, and it might be a little difficult to see, but I love the tone on tone. When you kind of look at it in person, as I say, it looks like it's been embossed when you do that tone on tone. So if you wanted, you could use this as a pattern, and you could draw and fussy cut and make it any color that you like. But I personally really like that tone on tone. And you'll notice when we get down into our lettering down below, it's you know, that white is a great kind of way for your eye to still be able to see all of those little individual words. So the goal for this one was to keep it elegant, keep it simple. So we're staying kind of as true and classic as we can with all of our color choices. All right, so now that I have all of those together, I will bring my page back over and we can start assembly. And this is all going to vary depending on the number of photos that you use, depending on the directions of your photos. So this could all be a little different, kind of depending on what works for you. I love, and I'll show you as soon as I get this done here, the little things that I think about, that when you look at a design and it seems so simple, it's really a compliment because we've made it look effortless. But I love how the photo fits perfectly into this little cutout here of our F. It's almost as if that frame of the F, the curve of the F there frames our photo. So that's kind of why it all worked for me. Now I can say that because I don't have photos on my page. So if you don't have a vertical photo, it's okay if you need to make this horizontal as well. Just kind of showing you the thought process of why I put things where I put them. I really love how those kind of nestled into each other there. All right, so since I have that one, I'm going to go ahead and add my second photo mat. Like so, and then that will allow me to kind of fill in the gaps. Now, if it's easier for you, so you don't know exactly where your photos are going to go yet, you could not put your photo mats down at all. Just go ahead and put your title down here, and then take everything else and leave it in that baggie and just leave it with the page. That way you can kind of do all that once you have your photos. But I'd love to see it once you have photos. I especially love when someone takes a design and tweaks it and kind of makes it their own. I love to see others' creativity. All right, so I'm just going to continue filling in the gaps. Just as the sample here. The bigger pieces, I tend to use dry adhesive, but these smaller ones, I tend to use the wet adhesive. You know what? Let's go just a little bit higher on this one. it. Like so. Now after I put this next piece, I'm going to pause here and then I'm going to show you why I put these exactly where I put them. And again, I realize that your photos may be a little different, so your placement may be a little different, but just gives you something to think about as you are putting all of your layers together. All right, so I'm going to pause there just for a second before I continue. So if you notice, the flower and the leaf, they are both kind of on a curve. So we have our teal flower here, our green leaf here, and because of their flow, both of them are leading your eye back to the photo. So we have our paper cut here. That's with that triangular cut. It's leading our eye to the main photo. And this here kind of draws your eye to help lead you into this photo here. So these curves are a great way to use that to flow your eye in a certain direction. So again, it's not something you always have to think about, but it just kind of gives you that extra little tidbit if you ever want to know like why I place things in a certain direction. And then for this one here, this one just says, we're going to draw our eye into this photo, but again, don't forget about this one. So all of these curves are specifically drawn to the photos. So we're not drawing them, you know, to our border. We're not drawing them to the negative space. We're constantly drawing the eye into the photo itself. Now for little things like this, again, you're welcome to use the dimensional 3D dots. I just went ahead and kept them flat. And now we have the rest of our title down here. So I'm going to lay it all out just like the sample. And then we're going to glue all of those pieces together. All right, so we have where life begins. So you will notice that as much as we could, we tried to keep all of those words together. Every once in a while you'll have a stray letter here. I always lay them all out first, make sure I have the spacing as I want it, and then I go back and glue them. So we'll continue on here. And see how tiny those are and how well they cut. So that's, you know, that's the exact reason why we use the My Colors cardstock. Because even though there's that texture to the paper, and especially with black, it's so loaded with color to get that deep black, it still cuts really, really pristine. All right, so I basically have it lined out, and then I'm gonna go ahead and glue it. So go ahead and start gluing yours too, but I also wanted to show you this other sample while you're gluing. So while you're gluing along, just check up at your screen every once in a while and look at the sample that we have up now. So this is another one that uses just the solid white background. And for this one, it only uses that 6x6 paper pad. So look at all of the color that we have achieved with this 2-page spread using only the white background and then pieces of the 6x6 paper pad. So on the left side of the spread, we have used 5 different pieces of 6x6 paper, and we've cut those down to various dimensions so that we could fit those along with our photo mats. And the great thing about it is that all that thinking is done for you. So these little paper pads are made so that every single paper coordinates. So all of that thought process is done. Now, for me, one of the most fun things ever is picking out pattern papers. However, if you feel like you're one that may struggle with that, these are really such a lifesaver for that, because every single paper in that pad is meant to coordinate. So all of that is kind of done for you. So then if you look at the right side of that June spread, you know how with this page, we took 2 strips and stacked them on top of each other so that we could form kind of that 12-inch appearance. We've done the same thing here with the polka dots and with the stripes. Now, they do have a certain pattern to them that you need to flow. So you'll notice our stripes align and our dots align, and we have just taken 2 of those 6x6 pieces, put them side by side horizontally, and made it a continuous flow across the page. Now, you'll also notice that I strategically put the rays of the sun, the large sun, those rays, exactly cover up where the pattern papers overlap. So you can't see at all where those papers overlap because I have strategically placed the rays of the sun to cover that up. So that's another thing to think of too when you're stacking them. To make it give the illusion that it's longer than a 6x6 or a 6x8, you can take a large die cut, you could take a photo mat, and you could cover those seams so they're totally covered and you don't see them at all, whereas we just left it showing here. All right, so hopefully at this point you have all of your letters all attached. So the last thing we have to do is just add all of those embellishments. So we have a few stickers left in here. Everybody's are going to be a little different, so they're all from the same sticker sheet, but they might vary just a little. So that's okay, just be creative. Like I said, all of the color schemes are going to work. And I am just going to embellish our page here. Just like so, and just a couple more. All right, there we go. Page number 1 is complete. We do realize this one is a little bit time consuming because you're going to have to cut your own paper since typically we already have it cut for you. So we're going to move on to the next page. So we're going to take a quick break, go grab your second page, and then we'll get started on it. All right, so let's wrap up this spread by now going back and completing the left page. So just like the first one that we did, we're going to start with that white 12x12 cardstock as our background. So go ahead and grab that white. Don't forget to check if there is a barcode on the back, and if so, make sure you cut that barcode off so that we're always starting with the 12x12. You'll need to make sure you get in the habit now every time. If you need to use the 12x12 in its pure form, make sure that you're looking for that barcode strip and make sure we get that cut off so that it is back to the 12x12. All right, so for this one here, you'll notice that we're going to pull out a lot of the papers from that 6x6 pack. Again, as I mentioned earlier, they're all made to coordinate, so why not take full advantage of that? We know all of these patterns work very well together. The first thing we're going to do is we do have this teal cardstock back here, and we're going to cut that down to fit our page. So pull out that teal cardstock, and we need to cut that down to 6 1/4. 6 1/4. We're going to leave it at the 12 inches, but we need it to be 6 1/4. Once you get that cut, we are going to adhere it about 2.5 inches or so from the top edge. So I'm just going to eyeball it. You can pull out your ruler, but we want it to be about 2.5 inches. And I'm going to align the left together. All right. So it looks, if you can see it here, it looks like when I cut off that barcode, I didn't quite get it to 12 inches. So I'm just going to go ahead and snip off that little piece there so we don't have the white border. Make sure that we're back to our solid 12 by 12 piece. There we go. All right, all of the rest of the papers here, you can do them exactly as the sample, but again, that whole stack is meant to coordinate. So feel free to mix and match any papers. So if you don't want to pull out the pink, just use, another teal instead. So feel free to have a lot of creative liberty when it comes to this particular page, because since we haven't pulled anything out, you are welcome to pull out absolutely any papers that you want to use. For this one here, I'm going to pull out that yellowish color of paper that has the tulips on it. So I do want to give the illusion that it goes clear across the page. So you'll need to find 2 sheets of that. Again, it can be absolutely any of these patterns that you want to use. I'm just showing you what my favorites were. This entire paper pad has 2 sheets of everything. So having that 2 sheets gives a great opportunity to give that illusion of that thick 6-inch strip of paper that'll go all the way across. Because if you remember on that June sample that I showed you earlier, how I used the rays of the sun to cover up the gaps. So here we're going to actually use our photo mats to cover up where the seam will be where these 2 pattern papers meet. All right, so we need to cut them back down to their 6 by 6. So that portion that gets torn out of the book, we need to cut that off so that they're back to that 6 by 6. All right, for this particular one, it does have a direction. So make sure if you're using this one that your little tulips aren't going the wrong direction. We want to make sure we're using them in the right direction. So I'm going to go ahead and adhere one of them first, and then I'll show you how I did the second one. Running my adhesive all the way around. We do want just a little bit of that teal border showing all the way around. So we're going to come in just a little bit, just so we have that little bit of border. Then when we go to adhere this one, the same thing. We just want that little bit of border there on the right. So you'll notice that they will overlap in the middle just a little bit. But we are going to hide that seam with our photos later. So it doesn't matter that all of our tulips aren't going to be perfectly aligned at that seam, because we're going to cover that up. So we just want to make sure that we align it there at the bottom. We want just that little bit of border now showing all the way around. Okay. So again, it's a very simple concept, but by using the 2 pages side by side like that, we're taking that smaller 6x6 piece of paper and stretching it out to really give the illusion that we, in the end, it looks like we had a 12x12 sheet of paper that we cut in half. So just by covering that seam, putting 2 like ones side by side, again, you'd never know that we were only using a small paper pad. All right, again, for the next piece here, you are welcome to use any patterns that you like. So if you're drawn to one more than the other, that is perfectly okay. But we're going to work on this top triangle here. So I am going to go ahead and pull out those exact ones. So we have that speckled one. Then we have that blue and white dot. And then we have that same teal one that we used on the right page. I like to mimic some of the patterns on one page and the other page. It really kind of helps unify them to bring them all together. All right, so with these 3 pieces here, we're going to triple mat them to create this particular shape here. So I used the teal as the base, then the darker blue, and then the white. So for me, when you are triple matting like this, I think it's really important that one of those is a different width or a different thickness than the other. It really helps the balance of that design, whereas if you do them where that they're all the same, it doesn't quite have the same impact graphically as when you take that one, and in this case I took the darker one and made it just a little bit thinner than the other. So now what we're going to do is we're going to adhere these 3 pieces together. When all is said and done, we're only going to see half of them and kind of see half of them in that diamond shape there at the top. So when I put my adhesive, I'm going to put it on the back of the blue and the back of the white, but I'm only going to put adhesive on about half so that the rest stays unadhered, because I'm going to use a couple of those pieces later, and it's much easier if the adhesive isn't on them. Now, if you have already put this together and you have adhesive all over them, you have an entire paper pad. So just go back to that paper pad, and you're welcome to use different papers than the ones I actually used. So I'm going to start with the blue. And again, I'm only going to put adhesive on half. And then I'm purely going to eyeball this. So I want an equal border on both sides, about like so. And then again, we're going to flip this over, and we're only going to adhere half, so I'm just going to run my adhesive gun over half of it. And then I want that blue strip to be a little bit thinner. So I'm going to adhere my piece like so. So you'll have something that looks sort of similar to this. Now again, there is no exact science as to the thickness of each of these. It's okay if it's a little bit different. If you want them to be identical, you are welcome to do it that way. If you want to use different papers, that's okay as well. So what we are going to do with this, if you remember how I always talk about using like that banner cut. So when we cut that piece of paper on our first page, it really drew us into the photo. So with these particular mats of paper here, you'll notice that they're in an arrow shape. And if you notice, they're constantly bringing your eye back to the photo. So it's, you know, leading your eye because of the direction we are putting them. so that's constantly leading your eye back to the focus of our page. So this one here, we're going to adhere at the top of the page. I'm going to make it simple enough where I'm going to take the top corner of my teal on the left side and that top corner here on the right side, and I'm going to take those two and use those as my guide, and that's what I'm going to adhere at the top of the page. So I'm going to use this corner at the top of the page and this corner at the top of the page. And again, we're only using half, so I'm just going to run my adhesive along the half that we want adhered. And then we're going to use again that corner and that corner as our guide. So you should have something that kind of looks similar to that. Maybe show that up a little bit closer here, where we have the teal corner here and the teal corner here. So what you're going to need to do now is flip that over, and we need to cut that so we're back to our 12 by 12 side. Now we are cutting through 3 layers of pretty heavy paper. So I'm going to stand up and use my trimmer to really kind of give it some oomph, but know that we are going through 3 sets of paper. You can use scissors. If you have your Tim Holtz scissors, this would be a great time to use those. Or if you have a pretty heavy duty trimmer, like this Fiskars here, you should be able to get all through those layers, going back and forth a few times. So I'm going to stand up to kind of give that some power. And go through all 3 of those layers because we want to make sure that we're back to that 12 by 12, like so. So now you have these 3 pieces left over. I'm going to go ahead and pull them apart. Because I'm going to actually use these 2. So I wanted to show you this. So even if you use a strong adhesive like I do, we're only going to use just kind of a little tip of the corner here. But for the most part, we have left unadhered what we're going to use to make this bottom one here. So I'm not going to use this one anymore. We'll put it aside. You can use this as a later accent on a page. So toss that back in with all of your little extra pieces and save that then for the next page. All right, so after we get this top one done, now we're going to go back and create this little one. So to create the little one, I'm using the leftover from the white speckled and the blue polka dot. And then I'm also going to use the pink. So we're going to flip back through our paper pad and we're going to find that pink one. And again, it doesn't matter which one you want to use. They are all made to coordinate. This is where you get to be creative. If I were your kindergarten teacher, I would tell you to paint that tree any color you wanted to paint that tree. All right. So if you remember, we used the edge to kind of line those up and create that point. With these, we now want to use this corner tip. So because of that, I need to go back and cut off that portion that's used to bind it into the book so that we have this solid corner here to work with to create this shape here. So does that make sense? So for this side, we used this corner of the page. For this piece here, we need to use the opposing corner here. So I need to go through and I need to cut off that little white binding strip on both of those pieces. So I'm just going to line that on my cutter and snip those off. If it's easier for you, I like to keep my paper pad all together. But you could, if it made it easier to store, you could go through and peel all those off and go ahead and cut them down to a 6x6. That way they're all kind of ready to use once you're ready. So the exact same thing that we did here, we're going to repeat again. So just as we created these 3 layers, we're going to create the set of 3 layers here. So for mine, I started with the pink as the base. For the next step, if you notice here, I kind of switched it up this go around and I used white as that thinner layer. So I'm going to run my adhesive on the back of the white piece. And I am going to give it about the same border as I did on this initial one here. You are welcome to change it up. So they don't all have to be identical, as you see mine, where I go thick, thin, and then the big piece. You're welcome to mix and match. If you want to give it additional layers, this is your project. Have fun with it. And then our top piece for this one is going to be that blue dot. Like so. All right, for this particular piece, I didn't want to go all the way up like I did with this one. You're welcome to. I didn't want to encroach here on our title, so I kind of wanted to leave this space. So I wanted to use it as an arrow kind of pointing up in this direction, but I didn't want to encroach into this. So when I adhere it, we're gonna do it about like so. So that that top point is about maybe ½ inch or so from our teal cardstock. And so I'm going to run my adhesive there on the back. All right, and again, we're just going to eyeball it. We want it pointing upward, but not quite touching, like so. So the same thing we had to do with this first one. We always need to make sure that we get our paper back to the 12 by 12. So after we get this little portion adhered, you can cut it with your paper trimmer, or you can use your scissors. And we need to cut that back to our 12 by 12. And I didn't use these any more of these pieces. So you can again then set them aside and use them on a future page. All right, see how it's already coming together. It's so exciting when stuff like this happens. How we're just taking just small, like what would be scrap pieces of paper, and really collaging them together to create this unified look. And the great thing about paper pads is all of this paper choice is done for you. The whole booklet is made to match. So if you're creating, say you need to create a beach album, you know, you buy a couple of these 6x6 paper pads and you could do a complete album with every page coordinating at a very little cost. Because these little 6x6 are pretty inexpensive. And by using them in bits and pieces this way, you can really stretch them over so many pages. You could easily get a dozen pages plus out of just one 6x6 paper pad. So again, it's really great if you have a themed album and want the entire album to coordinate. All you would need to do is have your background 12 by 12 sheet and then let all of those 6x6 papers do the rest of the work. Easy peasy. We're going to show you a couple more samples when we wrap up this class, and then our next session will have even more samples. So hopefully by the end of the 2 sessions, you'll have kind of several different options and ideas on how to use all of these smaller pieces of paper. All right, so we don't quite want to do this one yet because we're going to kind of intermingle it with our photo mats. So I'm going to go ahead and cut these 2 photo mats. And then with our photo mats and this triangle, we're going to kind of put this piece together here, covering up the seam of our 2 original 6x6 pieces. All right, so you have that navy cardstock in your kit still. We're going to use that to cut our photo mats. Again, this is totally up to you. If you want to wait on this step, you could skip along to the next step, and then just when you go to put this piece down, you can use it where, maybe only put adhesive kind of at the edge so that you can play around with your photos need to slip over or under or wherever that would need to be. But I tried to make it pretty universal with this particular page, that one would be horizontal, one is vertical, in hopes that that would work with several options of photos. So we're going to cut the larger mat at 4 1/4 by 6 1/4. And then we have our smaller mat there at 3 3/4 by 5 1/4. And then depending on how you cut your photos, if you cut them exact to the sample, you'll notice you'll have an entire sheet left over. That way, if you need to add additional photos, we want to make sure that you had enough of that cardstock, or you have an entire paper pad left over. That way you could take the extra navy cardstock, take the rest of your paper pad, and keep creating additional pages that would coordinate. All right, so we know that they're going to go about there. So I'm just going to leave them there and kind of lay them as a guide, so that I can do the placement of this last triangle here. So identical to how we did our number 1 and our number 2, we are going to put together the third. So I'm sure you have heard it, because I've said it many times before. When you are embellishing a page, or when you are doing a graphic on a page, it's best to always work in odds. Your eye sees it as balanced when you work in odd numbers. So that's why we've done the 3 triangles. It's also why we use 3 different pattern papers to create those triangles. But again, that makes it look very balanced when we do those 3 of the same element. So that's why we did that third one. So I'm going to go ahead and pull out the pink paper as the base. And then there's a brighter pink paper in here. Oh, there's the top one. So our top one is the diamonds. So also in here, we should have that dark pink right there. All right, so we have all of the leftovers from what we have cut off from these, and look, you still have all of these papers too. Again, you can get so many pages and purely using that white cardstock 12 by 12 as the base. It is pretty amazing how much you can get out of that paper pad. All right, identical. You should be a pro at this now, right? We've already done 2. We're going to do the third one just the same. So our base is that pink floral. Our next here is our bright pink. Again, we're only going to use half, so I'm only going to put my adhesive at half. That way, I could leave the other half unadhered so that I can save it for another page. I'm going to try to make my borders pretty equal. And then do the exact same thing with our diamond shape. And again, I'm going to have just a little bit of a thinner border of that pink, like so. All right, we're going to do the same thing. So I'm going to show you a different option this time, just so you can see that there's 2 different options, and then that way you can choose the one that's easiest for you. So when we did this first one, we aligned the left edge and the right edge. We aligned that with our paper, went ahead and glued it, and then we cut off the excess. You can do it that way, or I'll show you the second option now. I always like to try to give a couple options when they're possible, because what works for one person doesn't necessarily work best for the other person. So what you can do is take your paper trimmer and you're going to align this point on your cut ruler and this point on your cut ruler. So instead of aligning it on the paper, we're going to align it there. Let's see if I can move that. So this is where my trimmer is going to cut. So I'm going to align the top point along the cut and the bottom point along the cut. So when I put that down, I'm going to go ahead and make that cut and then adhere it to the page. So you can either cut it in advance and adhere it, or you can adhere it and then cut it off, whichever works easiest for you. We are again going through pretty heavy sheets of pattern paper there. So it will take a couple slices, but then our triangle now is all done and complete, and then we can adhere it down. So again, whichever one works the best for you, go for it. All right, so when we adhere this one, I'm not going to put adhesive at this very tip, because the way that I personally have it designed, this is going to overlap that photo. So I want to make sure that that photo can be slipped underneath later. Who am I fooling though? You know how long it's been since I've actually put a photo to paper? I say that, but I did start a December journal last year, so I guess it hasn't been that long. But typically, I have now for nearly 25 years scrapbooked without photos. But I'm probably not the only one guilty of that. It is so funny when I hear we go to, you know, all these events and all these crops, and people will say that they have boxes and boxes and boxes of kits that are put together awaiting photos. The photo's the highlight, don't forget. The photo's the highlight. All right, so I'm going to adhere this down in the lower right corner of the page. And then I'm able to adhere my photo mats. So if you don't know your photo mats quite yet, skip this step. And then all we have left to do is put together our die cuts and add our embellishments. All right. Let's see, that'll about go there. All right, I think that will work. All right, so this way now I have all of this space here to go ahead and finish up my title. So I'm going to set this aside, go ahead and grab the baggie that has all of our little pieces for this side. We're going to pull all these out and get gluing. Then as we get started with the gluing here, I want to show you just a couple more examples. With these examples, instead of using a white background, I actually chose a pattern paper background. But outside of the pattern paper background, I used no other pattern papers except those that were in our little 6x6 paper pad. So let's get all of these pulled out. Make sure we have them all get out of our stickers there. All right. So I didn't use any chalking inks, again, on either page. So it's totally up to you. If you want to take some chalking inks and go around your flowers and your die cuts, you're welcome to do that. when you are trying to select what color of chalking inks to use, so if you have your heart here, you always want your ink to be at least 2 shades darker than the color of your cardstock. So this particular color here, this is Pimento. This is kind of a darker pink of the canvas collection of my colors. So something like this, I would probably use like a red hot, like a bright, vibrant red to accent something like this. When it comes to this flower, so with this flower here, your yellow is on top. Again, you want to go just a couple shades darker if you want to use some chalking ink. So you would do like a desert sun, or you could also do like a pumpkin pie, which would kind of bring it a little more to the orangey side of the yellow, which would work quite well with this particular piece too. If you're wanting to ink, say, the flowers, we're only going to see that top level, that top layer. So we really only need to ink that top layer. But again, you want to go 2 shades darker. So a Caribbean blue, a Baja blue, something like that. And just hit the edges and maybe kind of go around the petal. This would be awesome too with the Nuvo glitter markers. So even though they have been discontinued by Tonic, many of you might still have the glitter markers by Nuvo. Give that little petal a little bit of an accent would be great. To use some shimmer, to use glitter, maybe add some little gems to your flower. Have fun and be creative. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to start putting all of these pieces together. So as you are putting those pieces together, we're going to go ahead and show you a couple different things on the screen there. So if you notice this first one here, this spread is called Celebrate. So with this particular page, instead of using a solid background, I did go with a 12 by 12 pattern paper background. So I found a pretty neutral, kind of monochromatic pattern paper that I could use the same background for both sides of the spread. But everything else is from that 6 by 6 paper pack. So if you're looking on the left side of the spread there, we just cut a series of squares. So that big triangle piece there is just a series of little squares of pattern paper, all adhered to a pink solid cardstock back. So we have all of those smaller pattern papers kind of put together there like a quilt. And then for the right page, same thing, where we wanted to give the illusion that it's 12 inches going clear across the page. So we just made sure that we had things all going on where the pattern papers would meet in that seam, to kind of cover up that seam and make it look continuous all the way across. So that pink polka dot paper behind the word Celebrate, that too is from a 6 by 6 paper pad. So 2 pieces cut, adhered side by side. There is a seam there, but because of the pattern and because of our word Celebrate, it really makes it hard to really distinguish that there's a seam. We've done a good job of kind of covering up that seam there. So again, the Celebrate, we did have to add the 12 by 12 pattern papers to make the background, but outside of that, the entire spread was made from our 6 by 6 paper pad. Our next example, this is just a single page, but again, I just wanted to show you the concept of only adding a background sheet and then how you can cut a 6 by 6 paper pad to make it work. So we've added that black pattern paper as our background and then cut strips from that 6 by 6 pad. Actually, I think this one might have been a 6 by 8 pad. So we've cut those in 8-inch strips. And we have literally just cut strips of paper and adhered them down the center of the page. Again, easy peasy. We didn't have to go through our stash to see what would match. That paper pad had done all of the work for us. Again, I believe this one was a 6x8 paper pad. Cut those in strips, put them down the center of the page. Voila, we have an easy base to get going to create our page. All right, so we just need to continue putting together all of our little die cuts here. I have just a few more to assemble. Again, if you did want to ink, just ink your top layers here. You can use the 3D foam. It would be really fun if you wanted to take micro mini pop dots and, you know, pop each petal off of the base. You could take your desert sun, your pumpkin pie to ink the red, your red hot to ink your center. You could use micro mini pop dots for that. Your page, have fun with it. All right, so finally here, all I have left is my Celebrate Good Things. The Celebrate is 3 layers there, so the base is the teal. And then we have our pink. And then our top layer is going to be the blue. All right, one more layer here. All right, and that will do our word celebrate, and then we can adhere it to the white base. And it's gonna fit down on that base pretty perfect. So you should know exactly where it goes. It is a little hard to see in the sample that it is all 3 layers. That base layer is super, super thin. But it gives you just a little hint of that teal color. All right. For my little trick here, don't do it on your pattern paper scraps because you'll want to use your pattern paper scraps. So find a little piece of scratch paper, and this is kind of my little trick that I do when I have a series of individual letters. I'm going to make a little pool of our adhesive here. It dries fast, so don't make it very big because you're going to end up wasting a lot. And I'm going to adhere the word things first. And I'm just going to very lightly dip it and then run off the excess there. And that way I don't have to add glue to every single little individual letter. To me, this just goes much quicker. So I'm barely going to tap it, brush off the extra, put down my letter. If you make that glue pile very big though, you can waste a lot because again, this glue is made, most liquid glue is made to dry really fast. And you can't shove it back in the bottle once you already have it out. So be conservative. But to me, this is way easier and way quicker than adding the glue from the bottle to each individual layer. And I think we might have planned it perfectly. All right, I'm going to use the bottle for the word good since it's bigger. Okay. And then we have our G, and I think we have just enough left. Perfect. All right, so now what we have to do is just add all of these pieces to our page, and we're done. All right, I'm gonna start with my biggest layer and add my title. And then from the title, I'm going to put all of the pieces kind of around it. Kind of, if you notice, using the same shapes on both pages to really tie those in together. I'm going to slip that and make sure that that green leaf follows our eye into the photo there. Almost complete. So I'd love to hear what everybody is going to use this page for. The colors are such that it's going to work with so many different things, I think. I think this color scheme could even work for an Easter sort of page. Or just the kind of like everyday general life. I think sometimes we forget to scrapbook just the normal everyday things. You know, the having dinner together, or cooking, or, you know, the kids studying at the kitchen table, your work life, your stay-at-home life. Those little things are all so important to capture. So I always love to do just kind of these general concepts pages that really kind of leaves it open to all sorts of different themes. So I'd love to see what photos you're going to use for this particular spread. And if you make any additional pages using your paper pack, be sure to share those as well. All right, I'm going to go ahead and add our embellishments here. How funny is that? So that little black piece, you see that? So there is a little piece that goes under the word good, and it was hiding out in my stickers. Sometimes those little pieces, you see them and you probably think like they're you know, you don't need to use them for anything. It looks like the inside left over from a letter or something. All right, I'm gonna just add a few stickers. You won't need them all, but you're welcome to use them all. I'm just gonna add a few here and there. All right, so now we have our completed spread. We're gonna flip that over side by side. And there we go, we did it. We have completed two 12 by 12 pages using only a 6 by 6 paper pad, and we have a plethora of 6 by 6 papers still left over that we could create another dozen pages, so it would all be in the same color scheme, and all we would need to do is add our 12 by 12 background. So thanks for tuning in. Don't forget, we have another part of this series. So for the next class, we are still going to use a 6 by 8 paper pad for this one, but it's with a little bit of a different twist. I want to show you, we talked about if you buy a paper pad, how amazing it is. Like if you buy one that's beach themed, you can create an entire album using that paper pad for your beach vacation. Well, say you buy a Christmas paper pad and then you have some left over in the end. Do you have to wait until the next Christmas to be able to use that paper pad because it's Christmas themed? No. So I'm going to show you how to take leftovers from a very themed paper pad and how to put outside pattern papers with them to create an entire different theme. So still using our small papers to make a very big impact, but in a different way. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you for the next one.